So picture this, it's 1973 and Ian Gillan, the man whose voice literally defined what a hard rock singer could be, just walked away from one of the biggest bands on the planet. Not fired, not pushed out, he quit. And the reason wasn't drugs or money or some dramatic meltdown on stage. It was exhaustion and the fact that sharing a band with Ritchie Blackmore had become genuinely unbearable. Two massive personalities, one increasingly small room. Something had to give, and in June 1973, Gillan was the one who left. But here's where the story gets really interesting, because what he did next absolutely makes no sense for a rock star at the peak of his powers, and that's exactly why we need to talk about it. After leaving Deep Purple, Gillan didn't go form another band, he didn't release a solo album, he didn't go on tour cashing in on his name. He tried to become a businessman. And look, fair play to him for the ambition, but the results were, let's call them mixed. He bought a London recording studio called Kingsway Recorders, formerly known as the Lane Layer Studios, and that one actually worked out. Smart move, solid investment. The man had good instincts on that front. The other ventures, less so. He pumped serious money into a motorcycle engine manufacturing company called the Mantis Motorcycles Project. Right at the exact moment the British motorcycle industry was about to fall apart. The company collapsed and Gillan went into liquidation with it. Then, and this is the one that really gets me, he sank £300,000 into a country hotel and restaurant in the Thames Valley, complete with a guitar-shaped swimming pool, and that one failed too. So by 1975, Ian Gillan, the screaming powerhouse behind Smoke on the Water, Highway Star, and yes, the original Child in Time, was financially bruised, musically idle, and running out of reasons to stay retired. All he needed was a spark, and that spark came from the most unexpected place. On October 16, 1975, Roger Glover, Gillan's old bandmate from Deep Purple, had organized a live show for his ambitious conceptual project, The Butterfly Bowl and the Grasshopper's Feast. Ronnie James Dio was supposed to sing, but Dio was locked into his commitments with Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, and he couldn't make it, so Glover called Gillan. Now imagine him being in that audience. You're there to see a quirky prog rock concept show, and suddenly Ian Gillan walks out onto the stage of the Royal Albert Hall. The crowd went absolutely electric, and something clicked back on the inside of Gillan himself the moment he felt that response. 2 years of business failures, financial stress, and retirement, all gone just like that. The man remembered what he was actually built for. He decided on the spot, essentially, that he was coming back to music. Here's a fun detail that almost nobody talks about. When Gillan started putting together musicians for his new project, drawing from people who would work with the Butterfly Ball in the early demo sessions, the band had a completely different name. They called themselves Shand Grenade. So that's a hybrid of Shangri-La and Grenade. It's playful, it's weird, and honestly kind of perfect for what they were about to do musically. Management, however, was not having none of it. They pointed out, and correctly, that the Ian Gillan Band was worth considerably more in commercial terms than a pun that would confuse record store browsers. So Shand Grenade became the Ian Gillan Band, and the real fun began. The lineup Ian Gillan put together tells you everything about where his head was at, because he did not go looking for heavy metal musicians. He got Ray Fenwick on guitar, a versatile player who'd worked with the Spencer Davis Group, John Gustafson on bass, fresh from a stint with Roxy Music, Mark Nausif on drums, an American percussionist who played with Elf, the band that launched Ronnie James Dio's career, funnily enough, and Mike Moran on keyboards, the prolific British session player. These are not the musicians you would hire if you want to make another Machine Head. These were jazz-literate, funk-influenced, technically sophisticated players, and Gillan, to his enormous credit, or his enormous mischief, depending on how you feel about it, gave them complete creative freedom. John Gustafson later revealed the band's whole progressive direction happened simply because Gillan stepped back and let them do whatever they wanted. Gustafson admitted he was personally expecting Deep Purple material. He did not get Deep Purple material. Roger Glover came in to produce and contribute synthesizers, and between December 1975 and January 1976, the band recorded their debut album at the legendary Musicland Studios in Munich. They called it Child in Time. Released in 1976, Child in Time is one of the most deliberately provocative debut albums the frontman has ever put his name to. Because if you were a Deep Purple fan picking this up expecting something in the neighborhood of Black Knight or Space Truckin', you were in for a rude awakening. The album is almost physically divided in two, and I mean that literally because it maps directly onto the original vinyl sides. Side 1 gives you 5 short, punchy, commercially minded tracks built around funk, R&B, and soul. We're talking Sly Stone energy, syncopated guitar scratches, throbbing bass grooves. The opener, Lay Me Down, throws you a bone. There's a crunchy rock groove in there, some satisfying Hammond organ stabs that'll feel familiar, but it's a bridge, not a destination. By the time you hit, You Make Me Feel So Good, the funk is front and center, and Gillan is adapting his voice to something soulful and rhythmic that sounds almost nothing like the man who once screamed his way through Child in Time in 1970. Shame is tight and fast, under 3 minutes, driven by Now See It's generally impressive drum work. Baby Loves Me, co-written by Glover, settles into a pure jazz funk groove. With Deep Pocket that wouldn't feel out of place next to Thin Lizzy's funkier moments, and Down the Road closes the side as a soulful keyboard-heavy blues ballad that divided critics pretty sharply at the time. Then you flip the record, and everything changes. Side 2 is just 2 tracks, and they run a combined total of nearly 20 minutes. The title track, Child in Time, clocks in at over 7 minutes. It is a complete reimagination of the Deep Purple anthem. Gone is the relentless driving organ, gone is the machine gun intensity of the original. Instead, the band builds a spacious, atmospheric landscape with lush Solina string synthesizers and melodic percussion. Ray Fenwick delivers a solo that's genuinely heartbreaking in its restraint, and Gillan's famous banshee screams are still there, but pulled back, almost melancholic, like someone shouting across a very quiet lake rather than across a roaring crowd. It's beautiful, strange, and deeply polarizing. Then comes Let It Slide. 11-minute plus progressive jazz rock epic that functions primarily as an instrumental showcase. The band stretches out, solos breathe and expand, and the whole thing builds this almost ambient cinematic atmosphere. If you've ever watched a candle burn down while listening to Shine On You Crazy Diamond, you know the emotional frequency this track is operating on. Okay, now how did the fans react? So predictably enough, not very well, at least not in commercial terms. The album peaked at number 55 on the UK Albums Chart. It did slightly better in Sweden at number 36. Hard rock faithful who'd been waiting 2 years for Gillan to come back and deliver another fist-pumping heavy metal record were largely baffled, occasionally angry, and in many cases simply moved on. Japan though, Japan got it. The album found a devoted cult audience there, which honestly tracks perfectly with how adventurous and genre-fluid Japanese rock audiences were in the mid-70s. Critically, the album was a genuine mixed bag. Some reviewers admired the ambition and musicianship. Others found the jazz direction self-indulgent or simply wrong for a singer of Gillan's particular gifts. Nobody was neutral about it. Which, if you think about it, is the most rock and roll outcome possible. You can't make a record this weird by accident, and you can't be this weird by accident after fronting Deep Purple. Ian Gillan made a choice, a strange, brave, commercially questionable choice, and he committed to it completely. And here's the thing, he wasn't done being strange yet.